okay?
Okay, it's been a little while since I last finished the last interview. What happened in the meantime, about a couple of months ago, I had a minor stroke, so that accounts for my slurred speech. I'll try and be as clear as I can. Anyway, we were talking about the 29th Squadron with mosquitoes. We were just starting to convert to jets at that time. We shared the base at Tangmere with number 1 Squadron, which was a day fighter squadron flying Meteor 8s at that time. So we got our first Meteor 7 dual trainer, and I got 2 or 3 rides in that with one of the pilots there, Brian Mercer, who went on eventually to be the leader of the Red Arrow aerobatic team. By that time he had risen to the rank of squadron leader. Brian Mercer was his name. Damn good pilot. We flew 1 or 2 jet trips with him anyway. Anyway, one of the sad things, just before I left 29th Squadron, we had a death with the mosquito. They'd been up on air-to-air firing, practicing with live ammo on a drone target. Somehow the pilot flying got tangled up with the drone and crashed in the English Channel. They were both killed, unfortunately. The Navigator had gone through navigation jet night fighters training with me at Leaming some time before, so I knew him reasonably well. He was an NCO, and Mac was unfortunately killed, and they sealed his casket and made sure that nobody opened it because he'd been badly bashed up, as you can well imagine. They got some bits of the aircraft, but not much. Anyway, he was buried up in Scotland, about 10 miles from my home, so I had the job which acting as the guy escorting the casket up there, so it went by train to London, switched stations, and a train up to Scotland, and I went with the casket out to the church where he was going to be buried in the churchyard, and met his father, and we had a nice chat. He wanted to see his son. I said, no way. He said, well, I've seen dead bodies in World War One. I said, yeah, but they weren't your own kin. So he went along with the fact that we didn't open the casket, and they had a very nice service for him, and I was there for that as well. And then, of course, it was about 10 miles from my home, along the foothills, which is a range of hills that run east-west from Stirling, Stacking, with Causeway Head, which was famous on the Battle of Stirling Bridge, where Wallace started his attack from that point and ran about a mile down to the bridge where the English were crossing. That was way back when, but it was immortalized in the movie Braveheart with Mel Gibson playing Wallace. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of little towns along the edge of the foothills, starting with Alva, Tillicoultry, then Dollar was the last one, and Milnerthorpe was in there somewhere. Anyway, that went quite well, and it tied in with that being posted to Lookers up in Scotland. It's near St Andrews on the banks of the Forth, that's F-O-R-T-H, and it was a peacetime base built before the war, and it was an H-type building. There were 2 verticals of a letter capital H with the bedrooms and bathrooms, and then the middle bit in between joining the 2 was all the basically the dining room, the main anteroom with a lavatory at one end of it, a corridor joining the 2, and then a bar off on the one side, and a ladies' room where officers could entertain their wives and girlfriends, so they didn't interfere with the normal drinking out in the bar with all the bods, and mainly fire bases. Anyway, I arrived there on a Tuesday, and I was quite surprised to see a tremendous amount of flying going on. And the reason for it was basically Tuesday afternoon and Wednesday became the day off for people up there, because we had 2 auxiliary squadrons, one in the city of Edinburgh, in the city of Glasgow. That was the backups left over from World War II. Of course, eventually they disbanded that, but they usually flew at weekends because they were working during the week, and they'd fly their jets at the weekend and keep in touch with the routines of squadron flying, which we supplied for them. And we had two squadrons there actually, 43 Squadron and Treble 2 Squadron. And 43, oddly enough, had been formed back in 1914 at my hometown of Stirling in Scotland. But we never had an airfield there, but there was plenty of flat land around the base of the castle where they could operate from. Anyway, that was a side issue with me. And so two squadrons, 43 day and two Treble 2 Natal Squadron. I don't know why they got that thing with the Dutch down in Africa, but nevertheless, that was a nickname. So I arrived, and the first guy I met was the squadron leader. He had pilot wings on, and he shook me by the hand and said, "Welcome aboard." He was very glad to see my little Navigator brevet. He said he'd been on, I think, flying Stirlings in Bomber Command sometime early on in the war, so he's very pleased to see a different type of wing on the base. And I said, well, you're going to see quite a few more. We'll get reforming a squadron here. And we reformed 150 Squadron, and that was first formed on June 12, 1918 as the first night fighter squadron in the Royal Flying Corps as it was at that time. Oddly enough, I did meet a fellow who'd been in that squadron down in London, a club I used to frequent quite often in the middle of London in the West End. And I met the guy, and I offered to pay for a trip to Lucas to come and see us. So this was quite some time later than when I arrived there, obviously. But anyway, he never did show up, so it's a great shame. It would have been nice to have somebody who had actually flown all that time ago on the old biplanes, as that's all they had at that time. Anyway, my CO showed up the following day, and we got him hooked up. His name was Don Boyle. This was his first commander, squadron leader, running our squadron, so he was a bit new with everything. And there were three big hangars at Lucas. It was a peacetime base, and they were pretty modern type by normal standards like we had during the war. And we had the middle one for our squadron. And of course we settled in with no airplanes at that time. And the crews started arriving, and we had a mixture of NCOs and officers. And it followed that within about 2 or 3 weeks we had the whole squadron there. Not that many. Our maximum strength was 15, and that allowed for people to go away and leave, and sickness, God knows what else. So you had 1.5 crews per aircraft. And our first aircraft was a Meteor 7 dual trainer, and we had a picture taken with the number of people that we had, all parked, standing in front of us and seated around the aeroplane. So I had that somewhere, but in the move here, as assisted living, that got lost in the shuffle. All the photographs disappeared. Anyway, it was quite interesting getting started up and forming everything. Our CEO was also a bachelor, so he was the senior officer living in. I got the job as president of the messing committee, and I got one of the other jobs. I went through about 5 of them in the 2.5 years I was there. And my first one, of course, was the messing officer. We were put in charge of the dining room setup, and of course the staff was all civilian in the cooking side, and the waiters were usually female WAFs, Women's Auxiliary Air Force, and they were very, very good. And the food was pretty good, really. I found the easiest way is pick the menu of what you personally like, and everybody has to like it or lump it. And we had a very good butcher in town, in the village, and he used to make a superb haggis. Of course, that was a great favourite with the Scots, because haggis is basically, it goes back to olden times. It was a sheep's blood, and then it was stuffed with all sorts of meat and vegetables. It's really a glorified sausage. And you mentioned the sheep's blood, and of course nowadays it's all edible skin that they use like sausage. Anyway, I'd put that in the menu once a week, and it became a popular hit even with the English guys. They were a bit sceptical about eating this rare dish. It has been immortalised with Robert Burns with his poetry, Scottish poet and so on. Very entertaining. Anyway, I got that sorted. We had a very large-sized dining room, and it had flush lighting in the ceiling, and that was used for when we had any ball, like we did with the coronation ball when the Queen got her coronation down in London, because she was Scottish descent, and we had a big ball there for that. I'll get into that later. Anyway, forming the squadron, we went down and the crews started arriving from various bases, some straight out of school, flight school and so on. One or two are from other squadrons who were using the basic experience of some of the crews already flying various jets. And our first jet was the NF-11. It was a night fighter built by de Havilland. It was a very good aeroplane. It was a single-edged job, twin booms, shaped like a lightning, but the fuselage was quite tubby because we had the Navigator sitting side by side with the pilot, a little bit back, because in front of me I had my radar set, and we had a radar dish and a nose that rotated, and it would cover the whole 180 degrees ahead of the aircraft. And it was pretty basic stuff, and I liked it because I liked the Mauser, and this was basically the same type of cockpit with the pilot off to the left, that side, and the right side slightly back from behind him, beside the pilot, but a little bit behind, slightly. Very comfortable airplane. It was good for about 40,000 feet and about 0.8 in this Mach, which are not, you couldn't break the sound barrier or anything like that. But it was an interim fighter at the time, and we operated them for a year. And we got the crews, and we'd fly mainly at night. We could, day fighter guys didn't do too much in the way of night flying. They did probably about 4 or 6 hours a year just to know they could do it. But their main job was day fighting, obviously. And we operated at night. We'd check our aircraft and stuff in the daytime, and then we'd get in touch with the ground control intercept radar, which was down east of Edinburgh, right on the coast, a place called Diddleton. And we went down there on a visit just to see what it was like. They were pretty nice guys, and we had a detachment of them up just near Dundee, which was about 10 miles further up the coast on the other side of the river, fourth estuary. And I got to know them quite well. One of the guys was a damn good piano player, and he used to play piano, and he liked to practice, and he do that. He had a little mess. There were about five or six officers operating this radar station, and I'd go up there on the Tuesday and sit and listen to him playing his ragtime, at which he was incredibly good, because that's one of my favourite musics. Anyway, he'd play piano, and of course we had the key to the bar, so we'd have a beer if we wanted to. Then we usually go and see a movie in the evening and catch the last train back to Lucas, and so that worked out pretty well. Dundee was quite a nice town. It was mainly industrial stuff. Jute mills were the big thing there, and it was quite a good-sized city. Anyway, that was the off-duty stuff. The other side, we'd go down to St Andrews, which was about 5 miles away. And of course, during my 2.5 years, we used to get all sorts of American guys coming from various bases in Europe to play at St Andrews, because it's the home of birthplace of golf, and it's a very nice course. 18 holes. The 19th hole was the name of a local pub, and that was kind of a tricky spot for naturally all the golfers. A little old lady sat in the corners. I don't know who the hell she was. I think she was almost on the part of the fittings, and she'd say to people when they came in off the golf course, because the clubhouse was less than a couple of 100 yards away, and she'd say, "That's the first support shot I've ever seen on that green." Of course, everybody was very pleased and buying free drinks. And this lady, she must have been almost danger to cremate her. She had so much booze inside her. Well, all these free drinks, everybody would stand around. She's quite a character. Anyway, that was the relaxation. St Andrews is a city, and classed as such, has a university there, quite famous. And I think one of the, well, finally it was educated there at that time. I never did meet him, but excuse me, of course they had summer breaks, so that was 2 months out of the year when they weren't there. But we were kept pretty busy at that time. We got our first vampire, and when we did, that was quite an occasion. So I'd never floated one of them before. I liked it right away. Mainly I liked the side-by-side sitting in it. I could see forward over the radar set, so it was very nice. And we used to practice with the GCI, and we do all our flying mainly at night. One of the reasons that we did low flying at night, well, during the war we had aircraft from Bomber Command who would do mine laying, dropping mines in the various estuaries around the north coast of Germany and across the North Sea on the approach. They used to bring stuff, iron ore, in from Sweden and Norway. They were all occupied during the war. So we would practice low flying at night, intercepting low flying aircraft, which would be a 4-engine bomber dropping mines. And the mines were maintained by the Navy. None of the RAF did any work on setting fuses or what have you. And you could get acoustic mines that would go off with the sound of propellers. Then you had magnetic mines that passing of a metal ship would trigger the damn fuse, and off the mine would go. And we would fly at 500 feet as the target, and the fighter would fly at 300 feet. And you're over water at night, and it gets pretty damn dark. Of course, you're so much further north. People tend to think when you go to Europe, you go east. If you go east from New York, you go down through the Mediterranean. You go northeast to get to Scotland and England. So our operations during the Cold War was all over the North Sea. And of course, with one engine, I was never too happy with that. But we never had one engine failure at all in the year that we operated the Vampire. But of course, we switched to Meteors halfway through, and that was twin engine, so much more comfortable. But we would fly 500 feet, and we'd normally do 2 sorties in a night, about an hour each sortie. And we were flying on one of them, and we'd done our one earlier on, and this was our second one that night. We were flying at 500 feet under GCI control, and the other guy was flying at 300. And we had our lights out, and he had his lights on as fighter aircraft. And I could see him coming banked around a steep bank coming in behind us. And we sat there, and I thought he should have called a fight. He found us, and of theoretically shot us down. So there was nothing. I looked back and there was no sign of any lights. So I immediately said to the pilot, "We better climb the 500. I think he's gone in." And he said, "What?" And I said, make sure we get a good fix on the radar." And he didn't do it. He called them up. They could pretty well see where we were, and they had a good idea of where the thing had gone down. He'd hit the water big time, and of course we lost the crew. The navigator was Sergeant Brooks. I can't recall the pilot's name at all. They were both NCOs. They'd been on 23 Squadron down at Coltesloe in eastern England before they came up to join our squadron. It's a great shame because they were a good crew. I liked them, but we found the wreckage and we found enough bodies to put in a casket, and we had a funeral for them all in the local churchyard. It was quite well done, and we had the wife of the navigator, Sergeant Brooks. She was at the funeral, and the pilot's name, I think it started with an E, but I can't recall. His father was there, and his father had been in a Harley Street physician, a psychologist, which was quite interesting. So he came down to the squadron, we showed him around the place. Our squadron mascot was two owls, or an owl on a scimitar, an Arabian big sword. And we had two owls there that we'd acquired, mainly from the pilot's sister. She lived on a farm, and they'd captured two of the night ordinary owls. So we had built a cage for them, and they lived in the cage, and they could fly around limited. We didn't clip their wings or anything. They were quite the way they were born. And they were good sized owls, about year big. And they would sit side by side, chirp away to each other. It was really quite interesting. And we were a guy put in charge of the owls, of course, to keep them fed. We got an air filled at night with our Land Rover, which was another type of Jeep, and we'd turn the lights off and then drive around a little, put the lights on. You'd see a rabbit and bang, we'd shoot it. We'd just take the whole rabbit and dump it in the nest for the owls, and there'd be nothing left but a few bones in the morning. They were unbelievable gannets, huge claws. They could tear your limb apart with them. And Freddie, when we'd have a party of some kind in the bar, the 43 Squadron used, they had a live cockerel and God knows how many hens. There's a good supply of eggs, and they'd bring the cockerel up to the bar, so Freddie would go down and bring one of the owls up, and he'd have a big rubber glove on, and it would just latch onto his arm, and it couldn't pierce the glove. That was the only protection he had. But it was really kind of well, but that cockerel was not a happy bird at all when the owl came into the tiny little room. Anyway, we never turned it loose, so he survived okay. Coming back to the squadron, we eventually got our meteors. That was really a big step forward. And for the Queen's coronation, she was coming up to Scotland and going up to Balmoral Castle. And the railway track ran by within about half a mile of the base. So anytime a royal train was passing by, there was no flying. You're never allowed to fly. So that was an interesting thing. And a friend of mine who'd been a pilot during the war eventually became a damn good doctor. His dad was an engineer on the railway, and he was one of the three drivers who was allowed to drive the train for the royal family. It was quite an honour, and it was interesting talking with him. But he occasionally get a chance to talk to the King, King George, as it was at that time. Well, King Edward was the royal family when I was in the Air Force then. He quit and married Mrs. Simpson and abdicated the throne. George VI took over, and he was never happy with it because he had a speech impediment, which was, he stuck with him for life, but he eventually managed to break out of it, and it was quite free and easy talking on a microphone. Anyway, coming back to flying at Lucas, we also allowed to do cross countries at low level in certain areas of Scotland, which were quite barren. You weren't allowed to beat up the hell out of the castle or anything like that, but you could fly anywhere in these at deck level, and that was always entertaining. I loved doing that, more so in the Vampire because I could see ahead and do all routine navigation at that speed and height. It was really quite fascinating. Nonetheless, we had another loss, 43 Squadron lost one of their pilots, and he was a damn good pilot too. Brian Lightfoot was his name. He was from New Zealand, and his family owned, oddly enough, a mortuary business, and we kept dreaming up our slogans we could use in the mortuary. Every time you eat a piece of cake, remember we have a slab for you, stuff like that. I don't know if they ever used any of it, but it was quite funny. He was a damn good pilot. He was killed in a strange accident. He'd do low flying in the winter time when there was snow on the ground and the cloud base was coming down, and as snow's like flying over water, you can't judge height very easily, and he flew straight into the side of a hill, which obviously that killed him and wrecked the airplane pretty big time. We only got half of him, and of course we had the funeral of all bits and pieces, and we had a guy doing the court of inquiry as to what had caused the accident, and he'd been up at the scene of the accident and taking pictures and all sorts of things. This is quite a few days after the thing had occurred. We were having a drink in the bar, and old George Elliott was his name, and he said, "What time did you put the guy away?" And we said, "The funeral service was about 2 o'clock today." "Why?" He said, "I shook hands with the other half. He had found the other half of his body," which was a bit of a shock to everybody there. But he was a hard-nosed pilot from World War II, so he'd been used to this sort of thing happening almost daily during the war. Anyway, that was the end of Brian. It's a great shame. He had a great personality, a nice guy too. Anyway, for the Queen's coronation, we put on a big ball in the officers' mess, and at that time it was the bar officer. And every year I had so many friends because we were mixing the punch. There's nothing more satisfying than pouring bottles of booze into a big plastic, actually it was the nose cone on an old aeroplane, and it was clear so you could see the colour. And that we made a punch, and everybody was tasting it to make sure it was okay. And as I said, more friends than I knew existed. We're all sipping away at this brew we were putting together. It was quite a nice light drink that wouldn't offend ladies, because you can't give them a rum or scotch or something. It's too heavy a drink for them. And this was a light drink, and just enough alcohol to make it taste good. And when you come in the door with your girlfriend or wife, you'd be met by the CEO of the base who'd welcome you to the ball. You'd have a chat with the guy, and if somebody came in right behind you, you'd move on, and he'd then go to the next one in the line, and that way you kept the thing moving, and you offer them a drink if they wanted. So then the ladies would slip away, and that would be it. And they'd go to the ladies' room and put away their heavy-duty coats and whatnot. So it was really quite a routine, and of course we built us. We had just about 2 miles down the road from the base was a big factory that made a paper mill, and they made high quality paper for various magazines. And the guy who ran it was Bill Laird, and I'll never forget him, a hell of a nice guy, Scotsman, and he was an honorary member of the mess. I got to know him quite well, and he supplied God knows how many rolls of paper, really good heavy-duty paper. And we built in the anteroom as Queen Elizabeth, as she became known as after Princess Elizabeth. We built a sailing galleon. Well, we built the nose, the bow, and the stern was a big structure, and that was part of the bar, and the deck of the sailing ship was all white tables, and the sides of it were the gun ports of a sailing ship, a warship in the old days. And then we had a little workshop in the back end of the ship, and that was all structured and painted, and it looked like a real galleon. It was very impressive indeed. Then we coloured all the paper with the black made beams that looked like the inside of an Elizabethan home at that time, with beams and smoke beams and so on around with it. This paper was all painted, so it gave it a feeling of a ship. And of course the bar was just a usual bar, decorated with quite a few other bits and pieces, courtesy of Bill there with all his paper supply. All this, we just painted the hell out of it, and we built a complete bandstand in the dining room, which we used for the ballroom, and it worked very, very well indeed. And of course, we cut silhouettes of all the instruments in the band and put them up in the submerged lighting in the ceiling, and the place looked damn nice. I must admit, it was very good indeed. And of course the ball was a great success, as we expected it to be, with a local band. What we had to do, we had quite a few Scotsmen there, and the band of course was a local thing, and they played one or two Scottish dance music. So I got the job of teaching them, all the English guys and their wives, how to dance Gay Gardens, which is a very simple dance. It's a communal dance, rather like square dancing. And we taught all the officers and their wives how to do this dance, so they intermingled that dance with some of the modern stuff as well. So the evening was a great success, and everybody seemed to have a good time. So that was the entertainment side of it. For relaxation, of course, there was a golf club. We had 2 or 3 guys on the squadron who were really good. The young number 2 in command, Dick Peters, a tall guy, pilot. I flew with him quite a few times. He was a very good pilot. And Dick was a damn good golfer. I think he had a handicap of about 4 or 5. But one guy with a scratch handicap. And of course, when these Americans came up to play golf at St Andrews, ask any guys to show us around. So we sent these fellows who could really play golf. I think they thought the whole base was of that caliber. But of course, they'd play for a round of drinks or something at the local 19th hole. That was always a good answer at the final one on the golf course. It was very famous because that was the original home of golf, and it's still very much admired and used even. And the greens are unbelievable, and the rough, it's real rough. Of course, it's right on the coast, and on a cold day, that wind comes off the water there, it can get really cold playing golf. So you've got to be quite hardy to stand to golf in the winter time. Of course, one of the benefits of being that far north so it doesn't get dark till quite late at night, so you can play golf in the evening quite often till just about dusk, which can be about 8 or 9 o'clock, which is quite unusual. That takes some getting used to. And of course, for night flying, we had to wait until it got really dark before we could even venture into the night. Our CEO, Don Boyle, he had a Welsh Corgi dog, which they're about yay big, quite a nice pet, and he'd keep it in the office with him during the day. And of course, one thing I found when we were taxiing by the building outside on the tarmac. We reached a certain tone level with the noise of the engine. It would cause the dog's ear to pick up, and it would start moaning like crazy as if it was in pain, but yelling at the sky for no reason at all. So we had to limit our engine speed just to keep the dog from going nuts trying to keep up with the sound. It was really kind of funny in a way. But all in all, I enjoyed my 2.5 years up there, and of course it was about time to move on to a different job. So I didn't know what I was going to get. So my COO recommended me for a permanent commission. I'd been on a temporary one after the war, and I've interviewed with that, and I got one with a limited term of what you could get in the way of promotion, which pissed me off in a way, but it turned out to be a good thing in reverse in the long run. I didn't know that at the time. Anyway, he had my recommendation for promotion. He'd been ultra-conservative and not too praiseworthy on it, thinking of it would reflect on him. And then they found out I didn't get what he hoped I would get. And the next guy he recommended do sky high, they couldn't do no wrong sort of thing. Jeff, but I met him when he was flying on exchange duty up in Canada. He came down to California, and he and his wife, I took him around town and showed him quite a few spots, and he did quite well for himself. He eventually rose to the rank of Air Commodore, which was a one-star general equivalent over here. Very good. I met up with him when Debbie and I were over visiting England, and spent 2 or 3 days living with him. By then he was retired from the Air Force as well. Hell of a nice guy. He unfortunately died. He had some ailment. I can't recall what it was now, but it was quite quick, unfortunately. He had 2 sons, I believe. I can't recall now. Anyway, I'm jumping ahead. I left from Lucas. I went down to West Raynham, which was down around the east coast of England. It was surrounded by American bases during the war. And Lincoln Heath was one which was quite nearby. And West Raynham was the Central Fighter Establishment, very high-sounding name, where they developed different tactics for the jets, which were coming universal with everybody by that time. And also we were developing night fighter radars, and I liaised with, I had a Navy lieutenant commander fly me down to Dufford, which was down the west coast of England, where they developed all new sets of radar. And we spent some time there testing a new one, and I got back to West Raynham, and I found out my duty there was pretty basic. I flew with one guy, Dick Peters was there, and Jeff Claridge eventually showed up as well. So we were happy to be reunited. Anyway, I flew with our Wing Commander Crew, CREW, and he was quite famous in World War II as a night fighter pilot, had quite a few kills. And of course our Meteors were what we were stuck with at that time. We haven't got any supersonic jets yet. They were just beginning to trickle in. This was the early 50s, 53, and 54, that period of time. And swept-wing jets were coming into the Air Force, and they were testing day fighters at that time. We hadn't got the lighter version yet. De Havilland were building one, the Vixen, the 110, was a twin boomer, like a bigger Vampire 2-seater, and supersonic, did all sorts of neat stuff. Anyway, I flew with crew one night and taking part in an air defense exercise with the night fighters in the general area. And to give us a bit more speed, we had a big fat ventral tank on the underside of the aircraft to give you quite a few extra gallons of fuel, and it streamlined pretty well with the fuselage and looked quite nice, like with it. And just every airplane carried one, so it was pretty well standard equipment. So he'd taken the damn thing off, and we got up and out. We were just trying to intercept a Canberra. I didn't know what it was at the time, just a big blip on my screen. And he was flying along quite well, and we couldn't catch up with the damn thing. I'd come round, I'd finished up too far behind, we could put a gun sight on him. So I suddenly thought we've been up almost an hour. And I said, don't forget, so we don't have a ventral tank on this. And I had two words, uh-oh. They said, we better head back to base. And we did a rapid descent to get down, did a straight-in approach and landed on the base okay in the dark, and taxied into our parking lot and stopped the aircraft. At least I didn't know it, the engines had run dry. And the next day I spoke to the guy who filled it up, the Bowser driver, and he'd never put so much fuel in a jet in his life. The tanks had been bone dry. We cut it a bit fine, but made it okay. Anyway, from there, I was suddenly posted to, I had applied for overseas duty, exchange duty, because I never thought I'd make it to the States, but I did. I suddenly found I was posted to America to fly out on exchange duty with the Marine Corps. And that was interesting to me. I'd met a couple of Marines when I was in Transport Command down in Gibraltar. It was a Major Walker and a Captain Yule. I always remember the names. Hell of a nice guys. We had a good time in Gibraltar with them. We were in the bar, and these two guys were trying to throw peanuts on the saxophone player's trumpet, and they were doing pretty well at it. So we took them back to our bar, we got them all juiced up, and they must deliver the boat back to the ship. That was a bit of a problem because at that time it was the Cold War period, and the ship could have got orders to sail at any time. So there was a British ship in port with just about every navy had a berth in Gibraltar. There was a transit from the Mediterranean to the Atlantic. Anyway, we've got the Admiral's barge off this British ship and piled the two guys out in the ship and back to the carrier, to which they made it in time. And of course, they had the little flag flying on this damn thing, and the carrier suddenly saw this British ship coming with the Admiral's flag flying out. Of course, it pulled up alongside, and the gangplank was lowered, and two very drunk Marines made it back to the boat in time. Based on that, we got a trip to the carrier. 2 or 3 days later, we did a tour of the bridge, and I was amazed to learn that they'd never been up on the bridge before. It was out of bounds to them, but they came along with us, and we had a good tour of the whole ship. It was very interesting indeed. So we did a flyby. We were down there in Gibraltar to stop the riots down in Accra on the west coast of Africa. And they were going to take the Cameron Highlanders, which was the regiment on the Rock. They had to have British on the Rock at all times, otherwise it went back to Spain. There's some weird thing in treaty about that. Anyway, that was a sidebar on that. Oddly enough, when I came out here to fly with the Marines, those two guys on my Larry Fortin was the navigator, and Major Thompson was his pilot. So they were both on the base at El Toro, met me at Santa Ana Airport, which is now John Wayne, when I landed there, because I came over on the Queen Mary again. I'd sailed on it during the war when I came to training in Canada, so I had a great affection for the old lady. I'd seen her being built in Scotland anyway as a boy, and to sail on her twice, much better in peacetime. I shared a cabin with a British Marine who was on his way to Quantico to work with on exchange duty with the Americans. Anyway, I arrived back in West at El Toro, which was going to be my base. Being a bachelor officer, I was quartered inside the old quarters. They had a very good modern building for the officers there, but it was full up with lieutenants and captains and so on. It was a great staging area for people going to the Far East. Anyway, I was based in the base and living on base at that time. And of course, everybody, my pilot, Squadron J.C. Dougie, was a damn good pilot. He'd done 2 tours on Pathfinders on Mosquito. And of course, Moses could carry a 4,000-pound bomb to Berlin, and it could do 2 trips in one night with just 2 guys on board. And the Americans, when they took a B-17 to Berlin, the B-17 bomb bay was only about 4,000 pounds total. And with a fuel tank on board, that cut down the bomb load. Oddly enough, I had a very good friend of mine who belonged to a club I joined called B-17, Combat Crewmen and Wingmen, and there had quite a few combat guys on there naturally. One of them, Al Oliveri, was a Togolier. He was a top gunner, but he also operated a bomb base. When he saw the lead aircraft open bomb doors, he'd open his, and when they bombed, he'd bomb. So that way, they got a big pattern based on the lead aircraft. And on the first raid on Berlin out of England, had been operating out of North Africa by then. The guy was old Cal Wuthering, go see Cal down on Long Beach, and he was lead pilot on that. He had his own jet, he used to buzz around, and because he was famous for his car dealerships and his commercials on TV. And his little dog Spot was usually a cougar or a tiger or some damn wild animal. He'd walk it around his lot with him. He got bitten once by one of them, so he was quite a character and hell of a pilot, I gather. Anyway, coming back to arriving in El Toro, I was going to spend just on 2 years with the Marines, and it was quite an education. I'd been to knowing roughly about the background to the Marine Corps anyway, with my contacts down in Gibraltar when I met in transports, and then of course with the 2 on the squadron with me, and being there with both of them, it felt really good. I sort of melted in with all the navigators because we all learned all sorts of similar stuff, and the radar was quite different from what it had as a night fighting technique. Anyway, night flying out in California, it was pretty easy because everything was lit up, you could see for miles. And of course, LA to Santa Ana was a huge spread of light, so it was almost continuous. And being able to fly at night was almost like daylight. You had so much light around you. But anyway, I started there. I'd been briefed by the British consul in Washington, where we were both reported, and then don't go into Mexico because if you do and you get picked up for any reason, you have to get the British ambassador to go down and you start a whole chain of bullshit that has to go on to get you out again. So I'm sitting quite happy on the squadron there, and I was living in this, it had been a wartime building, and it was quite comfortable, single rooms, good size. I couldn't complain at all. To me, I was very impressed with what I had. And anyway, I got friendly with a guy called Bob Anderson. He was a major, and he was a real character and loved old Egley's movie. He had a TV set in this tiny little room, and by modern standards it was huge to me, but it'd be small nowadays. David's got a bigger one in Hilberry room that's bigger than what he had there, but to me it was quite impressive. And he loved watching old English movies, and I got to know Bob very well, a very nice man. And he eventually came to our wedding many years later. I was very pleased to see him again. He was a ground pounder, basically in the money side of the Marine Corps. Nice guy, he'd been in Korea the whole bit. Anyway, that was my introduction to America. So it started off on a squadron of 542. Our CO was a Colonel William Gentry Johnson, W.G. Johnson, and he was 6'3" from Dallas, Texas, big guy, and rose medals, as all Americans did at that time. They had medals for just about everything. Anyway, he was asking, "Are you doing anything this weekend?" I said, "No, I've just got here. I haven't even got a car yet." And I said, "I want to fly down to see the folks for the weekend. You should come along as my navigator." So I said, "Sounds good to me." So I rolled up on the flight line on the Saturday morning. And he said, "I've changed my mind. We're going to go down to Mexico and pick up some tequila." I said, I can't go into Mexico." He said, "Don't worry about it." So I got my RAF flight suit on, and off we went, and we would go down to Nogales on the border and go over to Mexico, which is no problem at all. You just walk in, and went to a bar and picked up 2 jugs of tequila, and it was really kind of funny. I'm going back into America, and the guy said, "Wait a minute, who's this guy?" And the colonel said, "He's with me." "Why?" He said, "But it's all different. What? Don't worry about it." And you go, "Ken," so I wander on through it. He sorted it out. You don't argue with a 6'3" Marine colonel, and especially from Dallas. And I was back in America, thank God. So I learned my lesson the hard way. Dick was a bit shattered when he found out what the hell I'd done. And anyway, he was very good to us, and anytime they had spare fuel to spare, we could go on a cross-country flight to see as much of America as we could. He was very good that way. I'm highly impressed by him. And of course, when I flew with him, he's such a big guy, and he grabbed that stick, and I thought that airplane wouldn't dare do anything. This guy would master any problem that came up. Hell of a nice man. Anyway, coming back to El Toro, I got dug out. I said, "Let's go make our name with the British consul." One of the guys at West Random had been in the States at Eglin Air Force Base, and he told me, he said, "Get in touch with the nearest consulate. You'll get all your booze and cigarettes duty free." So and to LA, made a mark with the British consul there, who was very pleased to see us, and made a point of any official function he was at, if there was any vacancies, he'd have us come along representing the Air Force, which was very good. And then they gave us a catalogue. They said, "You just now we're ordering booze for the winter months for 6 months, so place your order, let me know what you want, and we'll get it duty free for you." So we'll go back home to Douglas. He was living on the base, and I'd managed to get off the base to live in an apartment down in Laguna Beach. Anyway, we look at the catalogue, and I said, "Well, I'll have half a dozen Scots and half a dozen gin, and I'll take maybe a couple of brandy, and I'll go through a list of what's on there." And he'd write it all down. Next morning I come on the base down to the squadron and said, "Do you know how much booze you order?" I said, "No, you wrote it all down." They said, "Yeah, but we have to drink 3 bottles each a month to get rid of it." So we cut it down to a working size, which was very good because we could entertain, and it didn't cost an arm and a leg to do it. Booze cigarettes came in metal cans, clothes number 3, I always remember that. About 52 a can, so they were cheap and they were very strong. The British tobacco was much stronger than the American cigarettes. And my friend of mine I got to know the family virtually adopted me as one of their own. They had 2 sons, both of them. One was in the Marines, one eventually enlisted in the Marines later. He was still in college. Anyway, I got his mother hooked on these cigarettes. She just loved these things. They tasted so good. A sweet lady, really nice. Anyway, coming back to the base, Doug checked out all the T-38, the jet trainer, 2-seat trainer. That was a tandem type aircraft. 2 pilots. The instructor sat in the back seat and the student in the front. It was a nice airplane. I got to fly in it once with Dougie just to see how it felt. And then I started training it on the radar equipment that we had for the F-3D. It was a McDonnell Douglas aircraft, and it's a 2-seat. It was I can't think of the designer's name offhand. He was very good. We met him on a tour of the factory. Anyway, it was side-by-side seating, which I liked, and I had a whole range of radar equipment there. Of course, we didn't have NAG, it was all radio range equipment, and bearings out of about all you got. But there was enough to get around, and of course America was feet deep in radio. You could fly anywhere and never be out of touch, which was very, very good. So I learned that, and then I decided, I've been lucky during the war when I trained on Wellington's on Bomber Command. My pilot, Jeff Sidmore, and he was had been a flight instructor, so he taught me how to fly. But in those days we didn't have dual aircraft bombers, they were all single-seaters. But he gave me enough confidence I could fly the aeroplane. He was a frustrated fighter pilot, he never got to fire guns. So I'd fly the airplane, he'd go down to the tail turret, and we'd be over the firing range at night and bang off a few rounds. He trusted me to fly the airplane. I never got to land it, unfortunately, but I was quite confident I could cope pretty damn well if we had to. And then coming back to the Marines, we flew together. I flew with quite a few Marine pilots, not too many because some were pretty green. They just come out of flight school, and I thought my life was worth a bit more than a rookie pilot doing. And we only had one fatality in the 2 years we were there. It was a pretty green pilot, unfortunately. And for some reason he got disoriented at night, coming into land and crashed the aircraft just off the airfield. It was a great shame. Nice kid. Anyway, I got pally with one guy, Gail Harlan, hell of a nice fellow. He'd been in Korea, fighting during the Korean War, and he was helicopter trained as well, which was unusual. And I got my first ride in a helicopter with him, as he was part of the air sea rescue and mountains rescue. If somebody came down in the hills, they could fly over and pick the guy up. El Toro's fairly a good airfield, still in use, but it went back to civilian use, unfortunately. It had 6 runways, 3 sets of 2, and I covered the main cardinal points on the compass for takeoff and landing. And flying with him, we'd fly over the local mountain area, down in the valleys, and see all the wild deer chasing with a little 2-seat chopper. That was quite a lot of fun. I enjoyed that. My first and only flights in helicopters. explode on a bigger one later on, but that was it. Anyway, he was a great sense of humour, and we hit it off very, very well. And I was living off base by this time down on Laguna Beach, and I'd been to happy hour. I left early because I didn't want to be caught driving drunk or something, so I got home and I get a knock on the door, and here's the Gail, a very attractive woman. And I thought, a bit old for you, laddie. And of course it was his mother, an extremely nice lady, charming. And she said, well, Thanksgiving is coming up next month. I'd like you to come down and share it with us and come in uniform. And I said, fine, I'll do it. So I got the instruction from the Gail, and on Thanksgiving I went down there in uniform. Of course, Gary, his brother, was there with all his cool chums and all their dates. And I was surrounded by all these females. And Gail and I were both in uniform, so we stood out like a sore thumb in that place. Anyway, there's some really nice, pretty gals there. I got chatting with them, and they all disappeared. They were going to a big dance somewhere on the campus. So Dill and I finished up down in one of the local hotels in San Diego, which is where they lived. And it was quite an evening. We were chatting away, and of course we got into aviation. I was upholding the traditions of the RAF big time, and he was doing equally well with the Marine Corps. And of course I think that people thought we were going to come to blows or some of the stuff we were arguing about. It was a very nice evening. I remember the hotel because the damn bar rotated, and it was an upstairs bar, L something, I can't remember the name. Anyway, you have to be careful because the bar rotated, but the building stayed stationary, obviously, and if you went to go to the restroom more than once, it was in a different spot. So finding your way around was kind of a novelty. Anyway, I became very friendly with them. His dad, old Pepe, was a hell of a nice man. He worked in LA, and he'd come home at weekends, but he lived in a bachelor hotel type thing in LA where he worked, which was really good because if I went to LA for any reason, I could get a hold of him and have a couple of drinks with him there, and that was nice. So on one occasion, the British consul gave a bar, a reception for all the consulates in LA, and British, German, French, everybody, and each one of them had their own, their favourite, most popular drink. Of course, the British one was Scotch, and then French had their wines and all sorts of good stuff like that, and they had the favourite food as well. So the British had the various cheeses. So we had quite a few drinks there, and I got more drinks than he expected. And he made a home all right. His hotel wasn't far away, thank goodness, and had a damn nice night on. And the Brits were very good to us in that respect. HMS Superb, light cruiser, came into San Pedro, it was at that time, down on the coast. And we were invited along on board ship for a little party with it. And the doctor on board was a Scotsman from Edinburgh. I got to know him quite well on that visit, so I said, we want to come down to Laguna and get a cab or borrow a car or something and come down and have a weekend down here to spend some time and see what it's like living on the coast. So he did. He came down, and the guys, I must admit, on the squadron really winding down him in a big way, and it was quite entertaining. We're going to the details. To set him up with a female it never worked out quite the way we expected. And the guys never spoke to this woman again. That's how sad it was, unfortunate. The timing was not good. I'll leave it at that. Anyway, the ship moved down to San Diego, so I went down there with it. He invited me to come down on board again. So I got Pappy and his wife, Mrs. Harlan, and took him on board ship. And I was very impressed by the British Navy. They really did them proud. They treated her like visiting royalty. She couldn't do a thing for herself. They did everything for her. And of course, it was entertaining because it took us down to the enlisted men's wardroom. And they cut the ration of rum in half water. But when you went to the petty officers and the officers' mess, you got neat rum. And of course, that was a challenging thing. You had to be careful what you did. Also on that ship, John Wayne, who lived in Newport Beach, this was years later, there was another British ship came in, and I was able to get John Wayne down on the ship as well. And he outdrank the British Navy. They thought the world of the guy. They plied him full of this neat rum. And they reckoned there was half a dozen men in the whole Navy could have walked off the damn ship the way he did. He could hold his liquor really well because they were out to get tight. And he was with Lana Turner at the time. And they weren't too impressed with her, but John Wayne was almost made an honorary member of the ship. Unbelievable. I'm very proud of the Brits and that. That was many years later, unfortunately. Anyway, coming back to Marine Corps, they were getting an experimental missile, the Sparrow 3. It was a beam-riding missile, and I got to ride on the Captain Korchesny. That was the pilot, and he was the armament specialist with the missile sides as well. And I flew with him off this San Diego coast to test this missile. The Navy had a drone set up down in San Diego, and we flew it out at sea off the Mexican coast. And we were doing a climbing 45-degree approach from below with the radar. And I got a good lock on the target aircraft, a little F4 Hellcat, I think it was. Anyway, we launched the bird and we got a kill on that, hit it spot on. So that was my first one. The second one I did with Dougie, and that was a tricky one. We were up on the Mojave Desert at Willow Springs. It was a little base out in the desert. I can't remember the name of the town. Anyway, we flew one there and we did a head-on. This time it was with Dougie. And it was a tough one to do. We were doing it over land. Of course, the hills are probably high around there. It's not like the hills in Britain. There's nothing more than 4,000 feet. These things were pretty damn big. And the ground returns on the radar made it tricky getting a good lock on the bird on the radar coming in. Then it transferred to the pilot's indicator, and he saw the thing come up and launched pretty well right away. And we got a hit on that thing. Of course, this was daylight we were doing it. And I come up to look at it, and of course the thing passed me going that way, and he said, "We missed." I said, "No, it's on fire, just not doing that much about it." Unfortunately, the photo plane ran out of film before it got a shot of the thing hitting the ground. So I had 2 kills to my credit, so-called. So when I went back to the RAF at the end of my 2 years there, I was on the missile game. I went up to Valley, that's further down the road. Anyway, I finished with the Marines. I'd become very friendly with quite a few people in town. moved into my final, I had 3 different apartments, one right on the beach, one way up in the hills, and eventually one which was just run behind the police station and the local courthouse, which was quite handy because I made sure I then never came home drunk. You never got stopped there. Anyway, I got to know quite a few of the spots in town. Laguna Beach at that time was, nowadays you call it a gay city, but a very high percentage of homosexuals lived in Laguna. The hills of Laguna Beach were known locally as the Swiss Alps, which I thought was kind of cute, but we didn't dare use it too much these days. But I got to know quite a few of them. When I worked there as a civilian, my office manager and I used to go to various restaurants for lunch. One of them were owned by a couple of gay guys, and they're really hell of nice guys, and we got to know them quite well. And they would invite a whole bunch of their customers to Christmas lunch at their home, which I was quite impressed by it, and it was really entertaining. Anyway, that's moving way ahead of my time. At the end of our 2 years with the Marines, we both had cars by this time, and we'd flown down to New Orleans to see if it was cheaper to take our cars and dump them there and have a ship take them back to England. We already knew what it would cost out of New York. And that was fine with me, because down in New Orleans was a gal I'd known since she was 16, incredibly pretty girl, Esme, and she was living there and about to get married, so I called her up and she came and took us to several high spots. But I love Dixieland music, and we went to quite a few, and God, it was heaven to me. I loved it. It was very, very good. And of course, we went to go back to El Toro the next day, and of course one of the starter motors burned out on us. We couldn't start the engine, one of the engines, so we had to call the base, our base, and they flew another guy out with a spare part for it. So we had an extra day in New Orleans, which was quite fun, and then took off the next day. And of course, we had to refuel at an American air base for the route back to El Toro, and it was a SAC base. And of course, I was doing the radio chatter at the time, and when we landed, 2 jeeps met us at the end of the runway, one in front, one behind, and we had to follow this guy with his "Follow Me" sign on it. Of course, my Scottish accent landing on a SAC secret base, well, not secret, but it was part of Strategic Air Command, and Curtis LeMay ran Air Command as a tight ship, and we were escorted into where we could shower and change clothing and so on, and have a bite to eat, and then they refueled the airplane, the same thing. They followed us out and watched us take off. It was unbelievable. Talk about a secret. They were very, very good in control. Anyway, we got back to El Toro, so the decision was we'd have to drive across country. That was fine with me, because I'd met Debbie by this time. One of the guys in the squadron was getting married, invited all the bachelors to his wedding, and his name was Walt Cunningham, who later became a Apollo 7 astronaut. And Walt was a damn good pilot. He loved flying with formation with Dougie and I, and because he'd get in so close, I could almost feel his wings up and nudge him in the elbow. He was a damn good pilot, and he finished up in the Apollo program. So what was interesting, he came to our wedding 3 years later when Debbie and I got married, but I'd met her just about a couple of months before I went back to England. I didn't know where the hell I was going to go, so I delayed everything. We were quite new to each other, so when I came back in '59, I was up at Vandenberg on the Thor ballistic missile. This was during the Cold War, so that was when we got married. So that was 63 years ago. So we're doing pretty well with it. We have 2 kids, a boy and a girl. One lives down in Murrieta, and the other one lives on the coast in Mission Viejo. So that's our family tree. Anyway, going back to England, I drove all the way across country. I stopped at a friend, a relative of Debbie's in Albuquerque, and they took me on a tour of the town, which was an old Western style town. Very interesting indeed. And then I went on from there up to Ohio. I'd met a gal down in Laguna Beach. She was on vacation, and she'd worked at Disneyland in the Magic Castle. And so I'd got her telephone number. So I called her up, and she took me on a tour of the city, and that was pretty well it. I continued on back to Washington. I checked in with the British consul, and then we both made it up to the ship in New York, and our car was shipped on board the ship, both cars, and we came into Southampton, and Debbie was car conscious, and we got insurance on the car right away, so we're clear to run back in the old country. So that was my tour. On the way back, it was on the sister ship to the Queen Mary, Normandy, I think it was called. It sank in Hong Kong somewhere. Anyway, it was not quite as luxurious as the Queen Mary. I didn't like it nearly as much. Anyway, it was a simple ride back to Southampton, and unloaded the cars and back in the good old UK. So we both had leave. We got 2 weeks leave to get your stuff in order and so on. So I went home to Scotland as usual. And then my next posting was to Valley in North Wales on the missile systems there. And it was the Fairey Fireflash made by Fairey Aviation. It was a small unit. It was a training site for mainly Navy pilots. It was converting onto vampires. Excuse me. Learning how to fly jets. And I was driving along them, and I saw everybody running. What the hell's going on? I was in North Wales by this time, coming in from England, Liverpool area, and apparently a jet had crashed there. And so I followed the crowd, and I got to the scene of the accident, and the jet was a single-seat vampire, a new Navy pilot. God knows what had happened to him, but he'd gone right in, and of course the thing blew up on hitting the deck. There was a whopping great hole, and smoke smouldering coming out of it, and there was a dog sniffing around looking for bits of body, I think. I got the local policeman who happened to show up, and I said, you better come and make the crowd stay well back, and they'll need to look at that and find out what the hell happened. So I left him in charge of everything. And I got to a valley, excuse me, I got to a valley and signed into the officers' mess. And I said, who's your technical guy? And they pointed about, and I spoke to him, and I said, I'm sorry, I didn't see the crash, but I was right at the scene of the crash, next to no time, so I better get somebody down there. And that was the start of my tour. I remember 2 months or so at Valley, which I quite enjoyed. Fairey Flash was, they were flying meteors, and they were flying this Supermarine Swift, which was a single-seat day fighter. First one of those SWAT wing aircraft. Pretty good airplane, but never much as good as a fighter. It was very good on low-level work, though, which is where they finished up using it. Anyway, I would just fly in the back seat and monitor the dials. I didn't have anything to do with firing the damn, but it was the pilotly operated radar, and the pilot was doing it all. And the missile was the bird, if that was the bird, it had two rocket boosters, one on either side, that would shoot it off and get up to speed, and then they'd cut loose and the dart would fly on its own in the beam going towards the target. That was the theory of it. It wasn't very productive. Where one of them, only one booster fired, and the result was a bird did a complete 360, fortunately headed down into the ocean off the coast of Wales. So that was quite exciting, but other than that, I enjoyed it there. I got to know the civil guy who was a technical expert, monitoring all the information in the mass, writing reports on it for the factory. And he was Hindley Max was his name. And Mike was a hell of a nice guy. His wife, Duffy, sweet lady, and she was they were living in a caravan or motorhome on the base. And I got to know them quite well. They were really nice friends.
Good.
I think I'll have to do for now, running out of tape here. I've got some other interesting stories, because that time at Valley got me launched into the British missiles system, and I went from there to RAF Navigator, which was the Royal Flying College, and they trained all future senior officers. They had 3 courses there, one for navigators, a specialist navigation course. They had the guided missile section, which I became a part of, and then the senior officers course as well. All 3, it was quite interesting there. And we gave lectures to all 3 courses, the main one being our own missile course, and I covered everything from ballistic missiles and top secret atomic clearance at that time, which stood me in good stead all the way through the rest of my career, such as it was. So we'll leave that for another round. Talk to you later. Thanks.
Okay.